The hardest part of getting separated is getting separated.
Yes.
It truly is. Nobody, except for if there's a domestic violence issue, nobody can make you leave.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you may be miserable while you stay there,
Everyone's miserable. And the kids are miserable. Think about
they
that.
know, and if somebody leaves, say you're a stay-at-home parent and the other person leaves and doesn't pay the mortgage, well, you're kind of screwed because I can't make them do that.
Yeah.
Unless there's a court order or an agreement to do that. So sometimes, I say a lot of times to people, if you feel comfortable staying, if you are safe, you can stay together and we can work on this while y'all are together. Then we can sign this agreement and you can go or he can go.
Welcome to the Exit Strategy, your no bullshit guide to divorce with the experienced attorneys from New Direction Family Law. Unfiltered discussions to help you move from victim to victorious and from bitter to better.
Hi, everyone. It's Elizabeth Stevenson with my partner in crime,
Sarah Hink.
With New Direction Family Law.
Yes, some attorneys and partners of New Direction Family Law. And we have an exciting new addition to the podcast.
We're so excited.
Not just for today, but ongoing. We said goodbye to Jen Bordeaux. She's still out there in the podcast world, so check her podcast out there. But she's moved on from the legal sector, and we're excited for her. But now we have a great new addition, our new marketing and business development manager, Cam Heinsohn. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited too. First one.
Yeah, and she came up with some great ideas for today, I will say.
Yeah, we're excited to talk to you about everything, and we're excited to have her with us today and ongoing. So welcome, Cam.
Thank you. Rolling with the punches.
Yeah. You just got to jump in whenever you feel the urge.
I'm here for comic relief, really.
That's it. She's been told not to lick the microphone.
Right.
Get close, but don't lick it.
Right.
Yes. And all the dirty jokes proceeded after that.
Yep. So there we are.
Yeah. So our topic today, suddenly single.
It's so funny. I had somebody just today talk about that. And the way they reacted to it just blew my mind.
I guess they say there's different reactions to trauma, and that's what it is, a trauma.
Right. And so person said, just came home one day and she was gone. And usually you get a big bunch of emotions about that. As calm as they could be. They'd worked everything out. And he was ready to move on. Now, how long that'll last, I don't know. But
so he came home, she was gone.
She was gone, usually there's something. I always ask, we've talked about separation. You going to counseling? No, none of that. We just gotten back from our vacation home and came home and all the stuff was
some indication that they're not happy.
No. Well, I mean, come on, really. There has to be some indication that they weren't happy.
I mean, it shows a lot about their communication skills, right?
True.
Just bounce. Like, where did they go for vacation? Hell? Like.
But they worked everything out, so there's nothing I could really do for him. So, they're just maybe just like, people can actually work together. Like, that's nice.
Yeah, which is surprising in a scenario where someone just left.
Correct.
That they would be able to still talk.
Yeah, I know. So I like that. And they didn't have kids or anything, so that was a good thing, too.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times I get, he, blindsided me, and I don't know what I'm going to do, and he wants to move out, and he's still at the house, though, and I talk more and more about it, but this happened like a year ago, and then it happened the year before too, and they never actually moved out, and it's just like, feels like it's sudden, but at the same time, it's been ongoing for a really long time.
Right. But I mean, and we had some people, they both came in and signed off on their separation agreement, and both of them were in the same room, crying, not sad, but just like, when you hand somebody a separation agreement, a lot of times it's like, oh shit, this is real. We're really going to do this. And it was very emotional.
Or when you get the letter, like a lot of times when I have someone come to me and they haven't separated yet, they really haven't had that, like, this is actual happening conversation. Or if they have, the other party doesn't listen, doesn't
want to hear
it.
Right.
And you draft the letter that says, hey, I represent, Molly, and this is what's going to happen. This is our proposal for the timeline of what we're going to do with the house. We're going to ask for financial documents, participate, please. Otherwise, we're going to go to court. But we don't want to go to court. We're going to figure out custody. And you put it all in a letter and you send it to them and you email it over to them. And, your client's just in there in pins and needle. Like, what is their reaction going to be to this letter?
I know. And if you're in the same house, that's really tough, I will say.
Yeah. And to think about what that person feels like when they get that letter. A lot of times it's not good. And then they'll hire an attorney and the attorney's like, well, they were, a little shocked by the letter they got from you, Sarah. And I'm like, Well,
come on, really, were they? Let's think about it. So,
right. Like, you should have known. And I usually tell my clients, you got to pull up your pants here and have this conversation with your partner because you married this person. A lot of times they want me to do it. I'm like, I'm not going to break up with your husband for you. Like, I will do this give you legal advice. I'll write this letter advising them what's going to happen.
Right. But you got to have that conversation.
I'm not going to go to your house and hold your hand and tell them, break the news.
That might be a nice side hustle. Yeah. What are they called? Doulas, like separation doula or something.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
I know. I might be my second career.
Well, we'll take that out of the podcast. That's to be reserved until we can.
That's right.
We can get that business.
Put a copyright on that, please.
No kidding.
Yeah.
All right. So somebody comes to you and let's say, I want to separate. They don't know anything about it. Write this letter. What's your advice on how to go forward with that?
With their conversation with their partner? It depends on some things, especially if there's children involved.
Right.
Depends on if there's any incidences of, violence or threats that have been there. Obviously, if there's some kind of threat of violence or domestic violence in the household, take more precautions about having that conversation, maybe having a third party present.
And sometimes it's, let's make a plan.
Let's definitely make a plan in those cases.
Let's see what's going to happen 3 months. You want to get out by the end of the school year? Okay, we could do that. We could get you a place. We could get you set up. And then you can have that conversation.
Right.
Or if you're out, I can I can step in and be your conversationalist sort of thing for them.
That's a whole other podcast topic. Right. There might be one in there already about domestic violence and ending those relationships because that's the most dangerous part of that domestic violence relationship is leaving. Yeah.
Right.
But anyone that doesn't have that, it is to have this conversation. Hey, whatever your feelings are about it, you don't need to go in depth. I want a separation. If we have kids, like let's, not involve the kids in that. Let's work together on how we're going to tell the kids. Let's maybe talk to a therapist if we have a therapist about how to speak to the kids about the separation, what's going to happen. I'm going to get an attorney or I already have an attorney. I think you should get one too, just to make sure that we're doing this, correctly and dealing with our finances, working through that together.
Right.
Hi there, it's Cam with New Direction Family Law. And if you find yourself facing or considering separation and divorce, you may realize that determining who gets what property can be one of the more complicated and confusing issues. It's so important that you're represented by an experienced family law attorney who knows marital property law and will advocate for your best interest. New Direction Family Law has a combined 80 years of experience protecting the rights of our clients and their assets. When an amicable arrangement can't be reached, we aggressively advocate, we support, and we educate our clients to achieve the best possible outcomes. When you're ready, schedule an initial consultation by calling 919-719-3470 on our website at newdirectionfamilylaw.com or click the link in the episode description. We've got your assets covered.
It's a whole lot better. I always tell my clients, don't go in and say, this is what we're going to do. I'm going to keep the house. I'm going to have the kids primarily. We're going to split all our... Don't do that.
No.
Because then you already got somebody all pissed off back here and they're not going to listen to what you say.
Yeah.
I sort of more say, here's what I've been thinking.
Yeah.
Here's what I think would be best for the kids. What do you think? If you can open the conversation, I think it's always better for people. But it's also a lot of times what happens, let's figure out how to tell the kids, and then the other person goes and tells the kids, so you never know what the reaction from the other party is going to be.
And it's really, and I tell my clients, and when I first talk to them, like, your spouse better than I do. I don't know your spouse. I don't know how they react to certain things. You really got to, dig down into how to communicate with this person to have this conversation. Because if they're very controlling and a narcissist,
it's going to be hard.
It's going to be hard. And you just want to keep it very simple and limited to the facts. And short and sweet, and kind of make it seem like it's their idea. Yeah. Like, hey, you've seemed really unhappy, so why don't we separate?
There's so many different types, kinds of relationships out there and relationship dynamics. And to your point, in theory, this person better than
I always say that. You know them better than I do, for sure. And a lot of times I'll tell my client, I grew up in the South, so I know that if I make it think it's your idea, and at the end I win, and you just have to sort of swallow it sometime and take it and let them think it's their idea, and then they come around a whole lot easier. Or go talk to your therapist, get a counselor, and let them help you make that conversation.
And so then if your spouse comes to you and says, hey, Elizabeth, this isn't working, I went out, that shock, how do we handle that situation?
I think Well, I think once they come to us, it's already it's already been done.
Whatever happened,
And
however you
there's
responded.
a text that's gone out, and I've been on
aware.
Facebook.
Yeah.
I got some Facebook posts I've made, So
Yeah.
it's more of, here's what I would advise you to do going forward. Don't make any more social media posts about this. Just don't. You can text, but text factually. And if you're talking about the kids, put in what's their best interest. And then you can step back and you can take care of your own mental health and your children and your job. And my job is to intercede for you.
Yeah.
And help work this out, or, sort of reach out to the other side, and you can tell your soon-to-be ex, we can't talk about this. It's really emotional for me. If you need to say something, let it go through our attorneys or contact Elizabeth.
Yeah, especially when it comes to finances. I mean, I tell people, if you're able to talk about the finances together, that's productive, and you feel like you have just as much power over the discussion as the other person,
Right.
like equal footing, then that's fine. And there are cases where a client will come to you like, hey, we've decided on this, or we've talked about this scenario, and you give them legal advice, shape it up to what is an actual fair, decision on the finances, and that's fine. But a lot of cases, people get railroaded in the conversation. It's not productive.
Right.
They don't want to pay you child support. I'm sure they don't.
I'm sure they don't. They won't pay you alimony. I absolutely understand that.
Yeah.
And that's where we step in.
Right.
And sort of, hopefully they have an attorney on the other side and we can work things out.
Yeah. And it's like, you guys talk about the kids, the exchanges.
Correct.
That's it.
Right.
That's all you need to talk about.
Okay.
Well, when the conversation kind of like goes sideways, right? Because obviously, usually it's not a very pleasant conversation, especially if one person's kind of coming out of the blue. How does that usually work? Like, what's allowed to happen as far as, I'm like, hey, I'm not happy. I want to leave, but really, I want you to leave the house.
That's the hardest part.
The hardest part of getting separated is getting separated.
Yes.
It truly is. Nobody, except for if there's a domestic violence issue, nobody can make you leave.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you may be miserable while you stay there,
Everyone's miserable. And the kids are miserable. Think about
they
that.
know, and if somebody leaves, say you're a stay-at-home parent and the other person leaves and doesn't pay the mortgage, well, you're kind of screwed because I can't make them do that.
Yeah.
Unless there's a court order or an agreement to do that. So sometimes, I say a lot of times to people, if you feel comfortable staying, if you are safe, you can stay together and we can work on this while y'all are together. Then we can sign this agreement and you can go or he can go.
And
Is that
people
like
feel
a
better.
perfect world situation?
It works. I mean, a lot of people do that. And then you're guaranteed, everybody knows what everybody's supposed to do.
Right.
And
you know what's going to happen to the house. You know what to expect as far as any support. So you can make better decisions about where you're going to, move on to.
Right. And
So that is a good situation, but it's not, think about it. A lot of times at that point, people are so sick of each other. They're just,
can't. But I've had people, I'm working on people that we've been at it 6 months and she's miserable. But he's upstairs and she's downstairs, and they can. I said, you can stick this out. We're going to get there.
I like the Cam wrote some notes for us, questions about these topics, and one of them was, "Can I make them stay?" It's like false imprisonment. Like,
I think maybe that may have been. Think about why the separation came about.
Can I rephrase the question? Yeah. So, more along the lines of, if you decide to leave, then I am going to keep the house. You're abandoning the home. You have no more rights to it. It's mine now.
yeah, that's not how that works.
That's not how that works.
But it gets said a lot.
Yes.
Yeah, I have a case right now.
Abandonment gets thrown around a lot.
She's like, he says if I leave that I don't get any of this, and abandonment. I'm like, no. Like,
That's the best advice I can say is don't listen. Please do not listen to the person who's saying, I'm going to separate from you. Legal advice.
Yeah. Zero it is correct.
Just don't do it. I mean, that's the only thing you can do, is all I can say.
You can't make them stay, and, it's really hard to make them leave.
Yeah.
Without a court order.
Right. And so sometimes, and people ask, well, how do I get him out? Sometimes it's just, you got to throw some money their way. Like if I know it's 50-50 if we go to court, but let's think about this. What's more important, your mental health, getting him out of the house, or paying him $50,000 extra or X amount extra just to get him out? That is money well spent.
Yeah.
And $50,000 you don't have to spend on a trial.
Right.
So there are all sorts of ways that we can sort of massage things around to make people do the right thing.
Yeah, there's just a lot of emotions going on.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I know that you have to be separated for a year in North Carolina. if you are living in the same house, does that count as separated?
It does not, sir.
No.
Oh.
Well, there's some case law that says if you have you can have a separate entrance, like if you have a basement,
But
separate
it's
entrance.
not just that alone. Like you have to put out to the world
that you're separated.
separated. So you can't if someone's living in the grandma suite in the backyard or whatever, you still have to.
You can't
have
take
your
meals
friends
together and go out to parties and stuff together.
And I mean, technically, even share marital expenses.
Right.
But we tell everyone different roofs. Might as well make it very clear. Different
right.
roofs, different mailing addresses. Then there's the whole reconciliation thing.
That's right.
People have dabbled into each other during my cases, which makes it difficult sometimes.
It does. So what do you? So if this person's come to me, he wants to leave. I come to you. What do I do? I mean, I am at a loss. I have 3 kids. I have a full-time job. I'm scared to death. What do you tell him?
If he wants to leave, the husband wants to leave, and the wife's my client. Mm-hmm. Well, if he wants to leave, he's going to leave, and we should probably go file in court.
Right. I mean, that's what I would say. If he's leaving and you don't want to wait and try to work this out, you can
because
eventually.
Court dates are so backed up. So, hey, we can still work this out in an agreement, but we don't want to have that fail and then be months behind on getting a court date.
Right.
So you usually got to work, move pretty fast.
Right.
And maybe before you file, you send them a letter, that letter we talked about, hey, we need to do this. And if you don't hear within a week or so, but a lot of times if they are intelligent person that is moving out or whatever, enough to know that they need an attorney, they'll get an attorney. Maybe at that point, you can kind of intercept that, but it's really a good decision to go ahead and file in those situations.
I agree. And it doesn't mean you can't settle. A lot of times you get a temporary hearing, which is they're very limited, an hour or so. And if you get a good outcome, it's very persuasive to the other party.
Yeah.
To say, maybe we ought to try to work this out without the court.
Right. And just remembering that actions during that time period matter to the court.
Correct.
So if he does move out and he stops paying the mortgage, knowing that his wife and 3 kids are there, his wife who hasn't worked in 20 years,
not going to look good.
That's not going to look good at all. Mm-mm. That's going to come back,
and bite you.
Yeah,
really
times 3.
Yes.
And you'll have to pay back what you should have supported, and then some. The court will punish people for that.
They will. I agree with that.
Is it smarter to, if I'm the person who has moved out and I am the breadwinner or responsible for paying the mortgage, do I give the money to my recently separated spouse so that that person can pay household expenses, or should I just pay the mortgage directly?
Typically, we advise pay the mortgage, and then just depending on the
I run
incomes.
I would, if I know incomes, we go, child support is by guidelines. I just plug in numbers. And so here's what I think you should be paying as child support, because if you don't, you may have to pay that person's attorney's fees, and then you're going to have a big back arrearage that you're going to have to pay too.
Yeah. So the child support number, you can just kind of guesstimate on as best as you can before you get at real numbers. And then it's case by case. But a lot of times for the spousal support, pay that mortgage, make sure that's covered. If you can, if your support's going to be that high to cover that.
But be careful though, you know, because you don't want to walk into court with your client who's been paying $3,500 a month, and it's been a struggle, and then he gets ordered to pay that because, obviously you can do it. You've been doing it, so you want to be. If you're to have the pay, or you want to make sure that he's not paying more than he should.
Yeah, you need to know the numbers at least on their side to know if this person can, really support 2 households like that.
Right.
Sounds like a good attorney knows the nuances.
Yeah. There's no case is ever the same. Every case is very different.
No, I agree with that. When did I need an attorney?
Well, if you just got told, you need to call one that day or tomorrow. Whatever. It depends on what the hours are. If you're planning to do the telling and separating, I think it's best to have a plan and speak to an attorney before you have that conversation.
And speak to an attorney before, if he's moving out, nothing you can do about the other person. But don't you move out until you talk to an attorney, is what I would say. Because you can do things that I can't undo.
Right. That's very important.
Right.
Working on the intake side of the firm and kind of front lines and hearing what comes through, we get a lot of, I think I might be ready to have this conversation with my spouse, or I'm not sure, but I've been thinking about it and thinking about it for a long time. And so I'm curious to schedule a consultation. And then, we're working through the scheduling process and collecting information on our end so that we can best advise and things like that. And then we get I'm not, it's a tough decision.
Absolutely.
I'm not totally ready. And then 2 weeks later, we get another phone call because there was a big argument and it just kind of came out. And now they really have to talk to somebody.
Yeah.
And so it's like a tricky situation because all the way up until it actually comes out, it's like, well, I'm not so sure, it seems like, for people. Yeah. And then, and so they haven't talked to an attorney. So you're saying, really, I mean, if you're pretty seriously thinking about it, like,
it's just information gathering.
Yeah, that's all.
And to me, it's really scary. I mean, if you've been in a relationship for a long time and going on your own, like financially, what's that going to look like? All these are big questions that are scary to even think about if you want to move forward with separation or not. So having the answers to what it might look like will help make that decision easier.
Right. And that's what consultation is for. I don't want them to walk out feeling like I haven't solved your problem, but you know what your best and worst case scenario is. We've sort of talked about what you need to do, and just giving people the knowledge, like you say, it just can reduce their stress, which helps them be able to focus on doing what they need to do.
Yeah. And there's discernment counselors out there who will work with couples about this decision, if they're going to work together, or even just like with one person once out, and help making that decision. And that's one part of it, is talking to your therapist about it. But having the attorney side, the legal side of what that looks like financially, what it looks like for your children in custody, that's really helpful in that process as well.
Right. And it does get better. You always get sort of, if you've had them 2 or 3 years, you get really connected to clients. And when they come to you and somebody's told them this, they are a mess. I mean, just a mess. And then it's like going to court and just like, now they're mad, and they get through that, and then they get to the other side, and it's like, oh, this is, now that I think about it, this is pretty damn good. I didn't realize what I was living in.
They've been on the divorce diet. They're looking great, and they got some new wardrobe, and they're powerful again, and they got their strength back and happy.
Yeah. So, there is another side.
Yeah.
Right. So it just takes a little time to get there, and that's what we're for, is to help you go through that process.
Yeah. I can't remember who I heard this from or, where it came from, but bad marriage can be hard and divorce can be hard. So you just choose your hard.
That's right. That's exactly
true.
right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. It's like going back to, people who are in a abusive relationship, they don't realize it because it's their norm. So if you're in a bad marriage and somebody, you're doing all the work and they're blah, 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 you don't know it because that's just what you're used to. And then you see, oh, there is another side. There is more out there.
My heart breaks when I tell clients, when they're explaining their relationship to me and what the other person might say to them. And I'm like, that's not normal.
Right.
That's not okay.
And then you see this light go off and they, oh, you're right.
Yeah.
So I think, we're not counselors, but I always, attorney and counselor at law, I think we can help people sort of realize, oh, my life can be better, and then let me go see a professional that can help me do that side of it, and I'll let Sarah and Elizabeth do the legal side of it.
Right, and get you to the other side.
Right, exactly. Yep.
Get that some
Thanks for listening. Don't forget to leave us a review. You can visit us at newdirectionfamilylaw.com. You can also follow us on Instagram at the Exit Strategy _podcast, or email us at exitstrategy@newdirectionfamilylaw.com. We'll be back next time with more no bullshit content about life, divorce, parenting, relationships, and everything in between.